if any of you have ever done this, where you've gone to eat something and you thought it was something completely different. One morning, I woke up, made myself some toast, thought I was putting cinnamon and sugar on it, and instead, I put celery salt on it. Not the taste that I was expecting. It tasted very bitter when I was expecting something sweet. Now, you might describe like baker's chocolate, if you've ever had that, or cinnamon by itself. You might describe that as something that's bitter. And some of us probably like the taste of some of these foods, while others of us can't stand them. Now, here's a fun fact. It's because of your genes. About 25% of people have a special taste receptor that makes them extra sensitive to the taste of bitter foods. Now, you don't have to be a genius to know that bitter doesn't simply describe a taste. Bitter is also a feeling. It is when you are angry or resentful because you think you've been treated poorly or maybe even unfairly. You might be tempted to become bitter when someone hurts you or gets something that you wanted or is liked more or appreciated more or treated better than you think that they deserve. Now, here in Elevate, and in this series, we've been talking about people being lost, and we're often talking about people who don't know Jesus. But today, we're going to discover that people Jesus called lost aren't always the people we might expect. Now, I can distinctly remember specific situations when I was bitter towards someone else because of something they had that I didn't, or they got the credit for an idea that was mine. And it can be really discouraging when you feel like you're doing everything right, but you're not getting the recognition you deserve. Or someone else is doing everything wrong, but they never seem to face consequences. Don't you hate that? Now, throughout this series, we've been looking at one chapter of the Bible, Luke chapter 15. And this chapter recounts a series of parables or stories that Jesus once told about things that were lost and then found. And remember, Jesus told these stories to the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were these religious leaders who were super focused on following these hundreds of religious laws in order to please God. And while these laws were important, and they weren't, again, inherently bad, the Pharisees had their priorities mixed up. They thought that following the law so closely actually made them better than everyone else. In week 1, we talked about the lost sheep and how God isn't angry or judgmental when we wander away. Rather, when we're lost, God finds us and carries us lovingly back to safety. Week 2, we talked about the woman and her lost coin and how God doesn't give up on us and how he values each and every one of us. And last week, there's a story about this son, the prodigal son, who selfishly left his family, squandered his father's money, but was welcomed home again by his father anyway. And we read most of that story last week, but we're actually not done with it. Now, like we talked about last week, one of the things that we can learn from this story is that Jesus always welcomes us back, no matter how far we wander from him. But Jesus' story had a twist. You see, Jesus' goal in telling these stories wasn't only to help the Pharisees be more compassionate about lost people. He needed them to see that they were actually the lost ones. And here's what we read in Luke chapter 15, verse 25 through 32. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. "Your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return." The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf." And his father said to him, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found." Now, as you can see, the father's response to the younger brother deeply upset the older brother. He was frustrated that he had done everything right, but no one ever threw a party for him. He didn't want to celebrate that his brother was back. He wanted to sulk in the unfairness of it all. He was bitter. He felt like he'd earned his father's love and his little brother didn't deserve it. Now, I don't think the father in this story asked the oldest son to help with dinner because he didn't notice he had a bad attitude. I think he asked because he saw how bitter his son was becoming. And by asking his son to join the party, the father confronted and exposed his son's bitterness, then gave him a chance to choose a different path. Now remember, Jesus told these to teach something important to the Pharisees. And yes, Jesus wanted them to grow in their compassion for people who are lost, but he also wanted the Pharisees to see how lost they were. Just like the Pharisees, the older brother believed that he was doing everything right. On the outside, it looked that way. But on the inside, the older brother was judgmental, bitter, angry, and selfish. And Jesus knew the Pharisees would think of the younger brother in this story as the lost son, but Jesus needed them to see both brothers were actually lost in different ways. And then the story ends. Jesus never tells us if the older brother decided to join his father's party, or if he stayed outside and threw himself his own pity party. Like, all we know is that he was invited. The Pharisees thought they knew exactly who was lost, but they were so busy judging other people that they missed the fact that they were lost too. The father invited his oldest son to join the party, and Jesus invited the Pharisees to join his party. And Jesus invites you to the party too. So where do you see yourself in this story? No matter where you are in your journey of faith right now, we all have something important to learn from Jesus. Whether you follow Jesus or not, are you lost in bitterness or judgment toward others? And if you don't follow Jesus, do you think you might want to be found by him? Maybe you identify with the older brother because you've been lost in bitterness or judgment before. And sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that life is like a game, that if someone else wins, then we think we lose. When someone else gets noticed, it doesn't mean no one notices us. When someone else gets valued, it doesn't make us less valuable. When someone else is welcomed, it doesn't make us unwelcome. When someone gets a party thrown for them, it doesn't mean we're not worth celebrating too. Remember how he said that by inviting his son to the party, the father in the story was both exposing his bitterness and judgment and giving him a chance to make a different choice? Well, Jesus does the same for us too. Through his parables, Jesus is saying to us, God notices you. God values you. God always welcomes you back. And you know that person you're bitter or judgmental toward? God notices, values, and always welcomes them back too. So what do? Do we stay outside sulking? Or do we join the party and celebrate that something that was lost has now been found? If you've been lost in bitterness or judgment recently, Jesus is inviting you to celebrate his love for the person that maybe you struggle to celebrate. And that's how you can get found again. Or maybe you don't identify with the older brother and you're not sure you really know the God symbolized by the loving Father in this story. And maybe you need to be found by Jesus for the very first time. If you feel like you've been spiritually lost, Jesus is inviting you to begin a new journey of faith. He's inviting you to let him find you. And just like the father in this story told his son, when lost people get found, it's always worth celebrating. Today, I hope you'll choose to celebrate what God has done and is doing in others' lives. Because when someone is found by God, Jesus invites us all to the party.